Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of The Imperfects, a great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, immediately picking up in the aftermath of the last episode, Abby ended up waking up. And the fact is, Juan wasn't there. I was like, oh, that's bad. I was like, oh, did Juan find Tilda? And it's like, no, Abby's the one that did. And I was like, wait. And it's like, she stopped breathing. I was like, wait, did they kill her? I was like, wait, what's going on here? I wasn't expecting that. I thought like, oh man, I thought maybe they tried to get her some help in time. And I'm like, the fact is, Juan's not here is kind of not a good thing. And the fact is, I'm like, oh God. Because I figured like he probably was taken or something. Because like, there's no way, like, why would he be there with Tilda considering the circumstances? But I was like, what are they going to do? Like, it's like, are they going to try and... Because at first I was like, maybe going to try and heal her. I mean, how would that work? I'm curious in conjunction with, like, obviously what makes, you know, Hannah immortal and stuff like that. I'm like, what would that mean in conjunction with, in particular in conjunction with what's already going on with Tilda? So I was like, what's going to happen on that front? And I was like, man, I was like, how are they going to reverse this? It's like, there's no way you're going to kill off one of your leads at the end of the season like this. And then she pops up and she's healing and you're like, wait, what? And it's like, oh, Tilda's immediately like, oh, I guess it's a good thing we have this healing factor. It's like, no, we don't. If we did, Maxwell wouldn't have died. So it's like, so what the hell is that? And I'm like, is that just an extension of her particular circumstances? Because like I said, out of anyone, Tilda seemed like she was like the main focus of the group to some extent. So I'm like, what is that about? So I wonder, is it just a byproduct of her nature as a banshee? Like, I've never known, as like, I mean, I guess I don't know the lore of banshees. I'm like, do they normally have a healing factor? That was interesting to me, but I'm like, the fact is she's okay, but it's like, well, I'm still pissed at you, Tilda, because you set all this in motion. It's like, well, yeah, it's like, cause she's like, yeah, of course you would be the one to lecture a corpse, Abby. It's like, yeah, she was frustrated with you because a lot of the choices you made, so, but then Sponson shows up, but instead of them duking it out, they want to talk. He wants to talk it out because he's trying to understand. He's like, Crane is up to something. He's trying to figure out what. You know, it's like, because now looking at the facility that Alex has, it's like, right, how does one lone scientist get through all this? Especially considering it makes a lot of sense. He had to get a loan last time to make all this happen. And then also, Sydney had to pay that off. So it's like, how was he getting the funding for such a large facility? It's like, it wasn't making any sense. And now, Sponson, it's like, right, his whole thing is about stopping monsters, but he just feels like there's something else that's here. Like, there's got to be a connection between Sarkov and Crane, and he just doesn't know what. So, he's willing to cover things up. What I thought was really interesting, too, is that, you know, and we only got a tiny bit into this, but Abby was like, why do you hate monsters so much? He's like, you shouldn't exist. Like, you're a danger to humanity. He's like, I won't let another one near my family again. He's like, again? And she's like, you're one too. And I guess we don't know what his circumstances are because he quickly changes the subject. So it's like, okay, so he's an experiment as well. So it's like, right, I guess maybe that's why, I guess like, right, sending a monster to hunt a monster. It makes you wonder, I would assume Benning's not one. I wonder, does she know he's one or something? Or has he kept that a tight lid? Does not even Crane know that he's an experiment too? I don't know. But that was kind of something, that's kind of I think one of those things of like, we're not getting that answer now. I'm like, but that's an interesting thing. No, but once again, it kind of makes sense. It's like, right, using a monster to hunt a monster type of thing. So ultimately, well, we know he doesn't have any regenerative abilities because his nose never grew back or anything like that. So, it might not be something transformative like a Juan or a, Sydney, so it must be something more, inert's not the word, but kind of like Abby and Tilda, like there's, like, it must be like a superpower, or even kind of like Owen with like the whole copper thing. Either way. So they're going to be working together on, he's covering tracks, even like left his nose behind, used the blood from Tilda to be like, yep, I most likely am dead. And so like, right, Bidding's like, right, now we got to hunt down and kill Burke and Sarkov, but obviously Crane wasn't too happy about that later part because it's like, all right, Sydney's one thing because she knows too much, I need her wiped out, but now, damn it, we still need Sarkov. Okay, I can't really justify that now, but it turns out Bidding is working with working with, what's his face, Sponson, to fake his death. So I was like, okay. Once again, is she one too? Does she not know about his circumstances? I guess it's like, right, they're allies, and it's like, right, he's like, there's something fishy going on in Flux, because their whole job is just about stopping the experiments, but it's like, once again, trying to figure this whole thing. Obviously, they've both changed quite a bit in the time that they've been away from each other, just that one or two episodes, that one episode away from each other, that it's like, I love the whole thing of Tilda calling her out, like, oh, you don't want to use your pheromones on an innocent person to get a ride. She's like, yeah, you're kind of a hypocrite. She's like, I know. And it's almost like, oh, okay. It's like, yeah, she kind of went through a lot of that last episode when you weren't around. But, she also says, like, right, just even if we get cured, that doesn't mean we're going to, like, that doesn't make us human again. And Abby's like, I know. Another conversation her and Juan had last episode. So under these circumstances, they ended up turning to Hannah, which that was an awkward situation. I even love, like, it was such a dick move on Tilda's part, because she's kind of a dick. It's the moment, it's like, yeah, when I told you about my mom having cancer, and then, like, Tilda leans up and is like, and you didn't help her? Wow. It's like making Hannah seem like the dick in that regard, but it's like, right, I should have led with, I was kind of alone, and I didn't have anyone I could talk to, and obviously I care about you, so it's like, right, should have led with that instead of, like, immediately turning to my pheromones to get what I want. But she was panicked, she was scared, because Hannah's like, I don't hate you, I want to hate you right now, but I can't. It's like, I want to be friends again, and it's like, and, potentially more. And I love this, like, right, we're supposed to go rescuing Juan, and you're spending all this time trying to make sure everything between you and, Hannah are okay, being like, oh, maybe we could go for coffee. She's like, no. So, oh, okay, I see. It's like, no, I work at a coffee shop. Like, oh, well, let's go for drinks. And I just love the entire time, Tilda's in the background just being annoying. Abby, and looking at her like, are you serious? Like, come on, you can worry about setting up this situation later. The fact is, we got to go rescue Juan, which he's kind of in a tough spot because of, hey, Sarkov, who's trying to justify all that he's doing, kidnapping not only Sydney, but also making a deal with Finch, but also kind of backstabbing her, but also having Juan. Basically, Finch wants to make her situation permanent. She wants complete control of the body. Obviously, Sydney wants to get cured, but he can't really experiment on her because he needs her around to give him the answer, because he knows Sydney won't give him the answer. So he has to experiment on Juan and basically make Juan a permanent chupacabra to kind of like do what he needs to do. And it's like, oh, you can't do this. He's like, yes, I can. He's like, no, he means morally. He's like, oh, yes, I can. So it's like, man, you are such a dick. And Isabel is no exception either. So when it's all said and done, at least him and Sydney were able to talk, and Sydney has her regrets about everything. It's like, yeah, she feels bad about all of this, and she blames herself because it's like, right, when I met you guys back at Alex's office and I told you the medicine wasn't going to work on you more, she's like, it was almost back when I had to tell you, when I initially told you about your diagnosis all those years ago. It's like, it was like I could see it inside of you. You guys were in hell. But she's like, all I could focus on was finding Alex. And it's like, well, you had your own situation you were dealing with at the same time, too. And it's like, you were going through your own hell. I mean, she's literally going through it. I mean, she literally has a freaking nose growing out of her head right now because of her circumstances. But she was going to try and tell, she was going to tell him something about, I don't think it was just about the Tilda thing. I guess it's like, maybe they already knew that Tilda had a healing factor thing, because Alex didn't seem too surprised when he saw her. He was like, oh, hey. He's like, oh, not like, oh my God, how are you alive? It's like, it seemed like he probably already knew, and Sydney probably knew too. So just to be a dick, Isabel was probably like, oh, let me take control. Nothing, don't worry about it. Like, they probably all knew about Tilda's like healing factor. They probably always did. Either way, it's like, oh, I don't like you. It's like, oh, really? You don't? I'm not your, oh, but you're my favorite. It's like, oh my God, Isabel, you're such a dick. I also love when they roll up Tilda breaking the glass, and then Abby walks closer to the door. I'm like, it's unlocked, isn't it? It's like, you didn't bother checking Tilda's probably like, who cares? So luckily they got to Juan. Problem is, he's like mid-transformation, and he's like, right, guys, I'm glad to see you, but if I am stuck as a chupacabra all the way through, kill me, like, because he doesn't want to be stuck like that, especially because he could put so many people in danger. But then at first it's like, oh wait, the cure seems to work, so immediately cures Sydney, and they deal with Sarkov, and obviously there's a part of Juan that's not really 100% sure if it's over. But Tilda says something really interesting, which, I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, we hear it with Sydney, and when she turns into Isabel, so I guess if the same thing would be applicable. She's like, right, normally when you transform, it's like basically a whole bunch of like bones cracking and stuff. He's like, oh, why you never tell me about this? She's like, well, it's not something comfortable to hear. And so yeah, I never liked hearing you in pain like that. So it's like, yeah, your super hearing probably. I mean, I figured as much just because like most typical werewolf transformation involves like breaking your bones. It's like restructure, just like Sydney. It's like, right, just restructuring your entire body. So it's like, it makes sense. It's like, yeah, but it's like, because I can't hear your bones like breaking. So like, it's not there anymore. You're cured. You're good. But, you know, it's like, what are we going to do about Sarkov? Because we can't leave him alive. Because if we do, he's not going to stop. But for Juan, it's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to kill him. It's like, because I'm not a monster anymore, you know? And for her, it's like, it's not really a monstrous thing, like killing Sarkov, considering like all that he's done. But, and, you know, Tilda has no interest in taking a cure because she wants to find out, kind of embrace who and what she really is. And, you know, Juan's like, you're not a monster either. She's like, I am. And she's like, that's not such a bad thing, you know? Because there was that whole conversation, too, about, you know, there's kind of a monster in all of us. That's always been a thing. Just everyone else's kind of monsters now have, like, a personification and a manifestation, a side effect, you know? So it's like, cool. Sydney was kind of pissed about Alex being, but he's like, no, like, it all worked out in the end. I was never going to let Finch have control. It's like, yeah, sure. You know, and she was just kind of done with him and walks away. He's like, come on, Sydney. It's like, because she's the only person he has in the world. Like, her kind of turning her back on him is kind of like, oh, that sucks. But, Sponson shows up later on and they question him. Like, he never realized he was getting help from Dr. Crane, because it turns out what Crane's involvement and what she really wanted this entire time was like, yeah, if they actually got rid of all the monsters, Flux would be out of business. So she was going to flood the market. You're like, Jesus, I mean, I won't spoil it. I was about to say there was a storyline of something else that kind of tilted in like, let's keep monsters around because it makes the business, keeps us in business. And it's like, knowing that, it's like, wow, you're going to ruin so many people's lives, cause all this death and destruction just for the purposes. I mean, I guess it's like, right, there's a lot of funding and money involved in it. So it's like, man, that, once again, it's just like, I feel bad for that actress because she plays such complicated, like, once again, like her from Yellow Jackets, not the best person, but it's like, her as Shivani in Roswell, New Mexico, I mean, she had extenuating circumstances, but she kind of went too far to get what she wants, and it's like, oh, here you are. I mean, all three characters she's played kind of had that, like, parallel of, like, yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of the selfishness of it all, because that was kind of a conversation between Sydney and Juan, where she's like, I'm sorry, I was so selfish. She was like, no, we all can be selfish. She's like, being selfish isn't always like 100% a bad thing. It's like, right, you wanting to helping someone, kind of wanting to feel good about it. It's not, you know, I mean, that, you know, that's just there's some part of the human experience that's, you know, it's a part of all that. But knowing, like, circling back, my point was like, it's just crazy with Crane letting that be her motivation, and also the fact is that it's like, right, being the super genius he is, it never crossed his mind like, oh, I should probably figure out where this money came from. It's like, no, he's like, when someone offers you money, you don't ask where it comes from. You just say like, oh, you get as much as you can't get, you know? So that's interesting. So Sponson takes him away, and everyone, well, Tilda more so kind of goes their separate way. All of them are going their separate ways. Because the plan initially is like, right, you know, she doesn't want to get cured, but, you know, now Abby does. And it's like, okay, cool. But it's like, cool, now that we've done this, we could actually go help people. There's so many other people who need this. We need to let Zoe know now that she's able to get cured and everything. So everything will be good in culture. But Sydney's like, right, let's just rest for now. We don't need, it's like, right, well, we'll get started on another day. Sydney's like, bye. And I did like that whole thing of like, she went to sleep at one point in time and she was like, trying to ask if Finch was there. I was like, she's still there, isn't she? Like, I was like, there's no way this is like resolved, because I'm like, are you really just going to let Juan walk away cured? And it's like, well, now Abby's cured too. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, Tilda's still having her powers and other people still having theirs as well. So I was like, okay, that's it. I mean, because Owen was never going to give up his powers, and neither was Tilda. So it makes a lot of sense. But I love that whole thing of like, once again, that conversation of do you believe what Tilda said? Like, if it wasn't for our situation, we never would have been friends. And Wanda's like, yeah, but we are friends. And so that we became friends. So that's what matters. And it's like, well, I guess I'll see you around. It's like, you do realize we're walking the same way, right? And it's like, well, this is awkward. And it's like, yeah, but I like it. I was like, I love that. It's like, yeah, let's say goodbye. It's like, well, it's not really goodbye when we're walking in the same direction to go home. So, but getting that 3-month time skip, I'm like, okay, what's going to go on here? Like, what's going on? And then, like, Tilda rescuing someone that's another person that's being experimented on. But it's like, well, she said a few weeks ago, so her circumstances are newer. So it's like, okay, so someone's still continuing this, aren't they? Because it's like, right, their circumstances are from years ago. Everyone else is like Hannah's and Owen's and all, like, they were all part of the wellness program, that initial bunch. Because there's like 20, there's probably like maybe 30 of them in total or something like that. Totality. So I was like, so what about her? So like, so that must mean someone is, but also knowing that, Tilda is embracing kind of like doing her whole hero thing, you know? And I think probably Tilda probably would, you know, she was the one that was all against the whole hero thing. And so now it's like, here she is kind of embracing it, you know, using this curse as a gift to help people. Especially people like her who are being, you know, ostracized for their circumstances. And it's also like she sees Juan's comic book is a lot more widespread and it's based on their adventures. Which we see him around Paloma. I'm like, oh, so your brother forgave you. And it's like, no, he didn't. It turns out that he doesn't know that Juan was there. And I'm like, oh, damn, that sucks. So Alejandro is sticking to his point. But I think his wife is like, right, you should be around your family. Like, she's probably hoping that eventually Alejandro will change his mind. But it's like, that conversation that Juan had with Paloma was, you know, beautiful of like, you don't need, being a hero isn't about your actions, it's about what you overcome, you know, and it's like, you know, that fear of being afraid, and it's like, she's like, yeah, I'm gonna miss Choopy, and he's like, yeah, don't worry, he's always gonna be here, and then I saw his nail, I was like, what the and she's laughing, and he starts noticing, and it's like, wait, I was like, oh, so it's not over. So it was a delay thing. I was like, there's no way they're just going to get rid of it. There's no way you're just like naturally cured, right? Then we get up with the Abby situation, and she caught the nano rat because she doesn't want to leave this up to Flux to handle a lot of this stuff. She's like, we've seen how they handle stuff. So I'm assuming at this point she got cured when also Hannah got cured. Everyone else got cured that wanted to cure. Well, the problem is, then all of a sudden Abby touches like side of the cup and her hands are sticky. I was like, what the... I was like, well, at first I was like, well, could her... Now I'm starting to wonder, like, are they all going to have, like, more monstrous transformations going forward? Like, yes, his, like, Juan's represents his to Chupacabra, but I'm like, what about Abby? Will her circumstances manifest? Because, like, you know, jumping ahead a little bit, we see her basically as in a cocoon at the end. Because at first I was like, could it be like, is she almost like a frog or something? Because I'm like, well, you know, like frogs can like, there's that psychedelic effect. Don't go licking frogs, but that's the thing. Like if you lick, I think it's very specific frogs or something. So I'm like, what is she transforming into? Like the fact is it's slimy like that, but it's because she cocoons herself. And I'm like, is she going to turn into like, because, I mean, it's like, there's probably, like, a culmination of many different creatures that, like, she kind of, like, make up what, like, that pheromone thing of, like, there's plenty of probably creatures and maybe even plants in nature that do that. So I'm curious, like, is she going to have a transformation or, so that's why I'm like, Tilda's abilities are expanding. So I guess everyone else's were in hibernation for a little while before like kicking in an overdrive, because now Juan is seeing like, oh my god, Choopy's coming back, but maybe it's even fiercer than ever. Like maybe the transformation's even more monstrous than before, and maybe maybe he's a lot, doesn't have as much control as before. Now, now Abby going through what she's going through. So it's like, what does that mean in the long run? What do those developments look like? And then we have Sydney. She's the one taking over Flux now because of the Crane was removed from, but it turns out Sarkov wasn't the only one she was funding. So I was like, okay, so I guess that explains all the other monsters too. Like other scientists she was working with kind of might have done other things too, still doing things, and that's why monsters are out there. And, Sydney's like, right, instead of going about things that way, we're going to go in a different direction and more so about, I forgot what she was saying. It was like, we're not going to go down like the monster hunting route. We're going to take a different like switch in there. Oh, right. Instead of like letting the mad scientists kind of do their thing, we're going to ally with them. It's like, right. It's almost, I think, kind of like that Nazi scientist stuff of like, okay, you were terrible people, but you are smart people, so let's use it to our advantage, kind of like the U.S. did. I'm sure the U.S. isn't the only one that... I think that's kind of part of our history, but I don't know like if any other country also like incorporated Nazi scientists into a lot of their projects and stuff. Either way, but it shows that Finch is the one that... She's like, yeah, I'm helping you out because a deal is a deal, and Alex is like, Finch? And it's like, yeah, she doesn't need to like switch anymore. I guess at some point, like, right, the cure happened, but now it's like either like Isabel doesn't have to switch anymore, or maybe she can, but she chooses not to keep up appearances that she's still Sydney, that she's cured and everything. It's probably a thing of she's probably now been able to learn how to lock Sydney's consciousness away. It's like, right, I want control, and now I get it. So maybe the whole transformation thing's done, but I think it's like, no, it's probably still there, but she just now is able to appear as Sydney while having her consciousness completely in control. So I was like, that's not good. And then we find out about, once again, what was Sydney's big secret that she was hiding. And it turns out the big secret is that their Sarkov, Alex, is an experiment himself, which you're like, oh. So it kind of makes, it's like, right, you were experimenting, poked and prodded as a kid, but it's also because he's basically a super intelligent clone of, was it Hollenbach? So he's kind of essentially his dad. So it makes you wonder, and you're like, wait, so what does that mean about his parents? Did his parents, did they give him fake memories? It's maybe that's the real Hollenbach. Like, he's based on Hollenbach, so maybe Hollenbach lost his parents at a young age, but everything else, like, Alex not even realizing he's an experiment, but knowing, like, okay, so that's what Sydney's been covering up this entire time, that knowledge. So it's like, right, don't get too attached to your experiment. So it's like, so does that mean Sydney was playing? Well, because I think she did get attached, and not just him. So that's why she always stayed so close. That's why she dealt with his bullshit for so long, because that's why. Because she was kind of high. That was like, this is kind of a controlled experiment to, it's like, right, the fact is that he grew to care about me and our friendship and stuff. It's like, right, showing that we can put him in the direction. Like, this is all about stopping what's coming. It is about, I guess, all that Alex was working on. He got sidetracked with other stuff, but I guess it is for the greater good of like adapting the world for what's coming. And I think his reasoning for doing what he's doing is still there, but it's like, right, they need to get him back more on track. And it's like, right, Sydney's like, we shouldn't get too close to our subjects. And I think she did. I think Abby, Tilda, and Juan, along with Alex, she got too close to him. Like, right, you play a role for so long, eventually it stops being a role. And she did start to care about Alex despite everything else. But the problem is, it's like, right, you don't get too close to your experiments. But I guess that also makes sense to some extent why, like, Alex's mitochondria was kind of in the middle of all of this. Maybe it has something to do with Hollenbach and not just Alex. Either way. But we did see his hand. His hand almost looked like Nate's hand. So it's like, I guess he kind of he did experiment on himself so to try and adapt the human race. And maybe it's like, whatever the thing is, it's still not solved. Like, we are still in need to try and save the human race from itself. But the problem is, Isabella's now in control, and she wants to make her situation stick around, so she's probably going to be sabotaging a lot of this, because it's like, right, we don't need, like, well, I don't know what her intentions are. She's around now, so is she really going to care about, like, keeping the other monsters as they are, or is she just going to go, like, yeah, I mean, maybe she just doesn't want to take the chance someone might find out that she's not really Sydney, that she's Isabel. I don't know. Like, that opens up, like, I was like, there's got to be a twist to this. And, like, I knew there would be, but those were some interesting developments. I was like, there's no way they just got rid of Juan's powers. Like, oh, I guess they got rid of Abby's too. I'm like, are they just going to be humans going for it? I was like, there's no way. So part of me wonders, is it because their circumstances are different? I mean, that would also mean, like, Hannah's not out of the woodwork either. No one that took the cure is. So their situations are probably going to come back and come back even harder than before. Which, in phrasing, but I'm wondering, is it because they're a very special case, that trio, that it always seemed like they were amongst all the other experiments? So I don't know. I'm so curious to find out more about that and see what the long implications are behind all that, because it's like, right, that's why I think Sydney was even more apologetic now, knowing, like, right, like, you know, yes, it's for the greater good, but also realizing, like, I wasn't just using Alex, I was also using you, and I felt bad about it. I think she was legitimately, I mean, because I brought it up, like, she kind of did sometimes not have the best bedside manner. It's because I think on some level she was trying to separate herself from the others to some extent, to kind of block off her emotions and everything, so I wonder how Alex is going to feel knowing that he is an experiment. It's like, he's going to probably pretend like it doesn't affect him, but it's like, well, it will, knowing, like, oh, I'm not even real me, and it makes it even more jacked up that you're an experimenting on other experiments, because you treat, so it's like, maybe that'll trigger something inside of him, because once again, he buries a lot of his emotions, but now you're like, well, is that 100% him? He thinks it's him, but how much of it is him, and how much is it just they designed him that way? He does seem like he was becoming more human, like, the whole, like, arrogant, like, scientist stuff, it seemed like they needed him that way, but now it seems like he got so sidetracked in other stuff that he wanted to do, that he wasn't focusing on things. It's like, and Sydney saying, like, him kind of caring about our friendship and everything in the end, kind of shows that maybe we can push him back onto the right track, that he's kind of human enough, but it's almost like, yeah, an experiment's an experiment, like, don't trust, I don't know. And what does that mean, once again, in conjunction with, like, her not really being herself anymore, her being Finch? I mean, I'd assume Sydney's there, just she's buried deep in the void, and she's screaming out, and no one can hear her, and Finch is blocking her out, so. At the time of me recording this, it still hasn't been decided whether or not the Imperfects is getting a season 2 or not. Obviously, fingers crossed, hoping that it does. It has only been a week at the time of me, well, a little over a week at the time of me recording this, so there's always time for that to change in the next coming weeks, but I do hope we do get a season 2, with all this being set up, so much story, and once again, finding out the full ramification of, like, what Juan and Abby's circumstances, and even Sydney's circumstances are all about. There's going to be other, probably, mad scientists they're going to have to deal with, especially those that are now being brought into the fold by Flux, other some people probably, like, you know, helping those who have been transformed, because now things are kind of spreading. It's like the public is being warned about it, but it's also being kind of treated as like a hoax. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see, especially Abby being so close to her family again. And it's like, oh, cool. Now we're going to have to get rid of that, but once again, maybe her constitution or her circumstances might be different. Same thing for Juan and his brother. Our trio have kind of gone their separate ways, but it seems like they're going to have to come back together for what's the storm that's essentially coming. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what a potential season 2 would look like. Like I said, fingers crossed, hoping we get one, because I'd love to see what happens next. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good